One of the things that I'm always concerned about with robotics is because it's so new, we don't really know what the standards are going to be in the future. I have a friend who bought an older house and was visiting him a couple months ago, and he showed me where they had telephone jacks in almost every room, and where they had central air, the things that you plug in the edge of the vacuum cleaner and it helps vacuum it. And at some point, those were thought to be really the cutting edge with technology and what people wanted, and that was a big selling feature. But then the market changed, and we don't want telephone jacks in every room anymore. We don't want a telephone jack in general in most cases. And so, how do you reconcile that thought for a 3PL who's like, you know what, I know I need to be doing something here, but I don't want to get locked into something that's going to have a capex cycle of 10 to 15 years and be out of date 2 to 3 years from now?
I think you make perfect the enemy of good, right? If you keep pushing off, of course, every iteration of technology is better than its predecessor, right? So, yes, if I wait one more year, it's going to be incrementally better. But there's also the what if costs in those situations. And sometimes doing something that's decent to good is better than doing nothing at all. And just then what you have to look for is a couple things is like maybe shorter term ROIs. So, can I get to 12, 18-month ROIs? And hopefully I'm tying that to a 4 or 5 year contract as an example. And I get to really double down in my second half of the contract life. That's some way to look at it. Maybe do smaller increments of it. Maybe not do an entire building, but portions of it. And then you can do increment. I think the other way with some of these as a service models where you will constantly get the upgrades by partnering with those types of companies because they're going to continue to deploy latest and greatest, and it gets pushed down to everybody. So I think that's some other things to think about. But we know this in every aspect of our life. Think about all the way back to when we were using Walkmans and tape recorders and then Discmans and CDs, and then it went to the iPod and on. Yes, everything got better, but if we waited till digital downloads, we would have skipped 20 years of music and we would have been bored to death. And I think that same holds true in warehouse automations. Like having something that's better than nothing now for as long as you didn't sign up for a 10-year ROI. So I would look through the lens of 3 year and less to get my paybacks, probably is a justifiable solution. And longer than that, I don't know that I'm going to have a contract long enough. And to your point, how many other things are going to leapfrog it in the meantime to wait for that payout?
Yeah. So when it comes to a 3 year ROI timeframe in feedback loop that you're looking at, is it realistic to expect to be break even at the end of 3 years, or is it something that within 3 years you'll be in the black and you'll be doing much better, and of course you're going to re-up? Like where do you try to tell people to think about, like, this is when you should start seeing an impact, this is when you start seeing savings, and this is when you've recouped your investment and then some?
I think they'll get it sooner than that. And I think they'll get to not just break even, but turn a profit on that component of it faster because there's things that people aren't accounting for is the rise of inflation. Labor rates can still continue to go up because availability of it's still down. There's other pressured factors that are happening that people don't do a good job of putting in their cost models. So I think if their models say in 3, I think we're going to see that happen sooner. I also think anything that's using an AI solution is an iterative technology and gets better. So if we're modeling it where it's at today, I think it'll incrementally increase and outperform over time. And I also think just people as they use things, their people like the engineering teams, ops teams get better and smarter and can learn and throw other ways and figure out, oh, hey, I think if we change the path to do this or we move this wall over here, the people that are around things start figuring out hacks, if you will, of getting more out of something. I think if they're targeting that 3, I think it happens sooner. And I think then the other thing that'll happen in a lot of contracts is there's some type of year over year rate increase that happens in a lot of the 3PL world. And so they're going to generate more income in second year than they did in the first year, especially if the customers are growing their volume and they're able to charge a little bit more to account for some of the general rate increase stuff that's going on. So that's why I say I think people get to it faster than they think they will, just because of some of those factors that don't get into the models.
That's helpful because I think one of the concerns I've heard from people is, hey, if I have a 3 year contract horizon, are they going to take 100% of the savings over those 3 years? And so I'm better off, like, yes, I had robotics and I got experience with it, but am I better off financially by working with it? What you're saying is that by the end of that 3 year term, you're going to be re-upping and looking to do it again because you've got actual savings that you can point to.
Yeah, and if you're worried about that, right? I've written a lot of contracts over the years that have continuous improvement language in it, where there's some type of a joint ownership of improvement, trying to cut the cost curve down. And then if that's the case, then who owns the capital, right? So if somebody's worried about that, then they can invest in the automation depending on the type of relationship, and they could put the capital up front, and then they will control their destiny. But if they don't want to put it up front, they want to put it on the onus of the 3PL, then I think it would hold true to the terms of the contracts, and they'll make the 3PL do better towards their own life. But as you well know, there's lots of contracts and there's lots of 3PLs out there, and there's lots of things. So that ultimately the market dictates pricing, right? And there's going to be, when they go to re-up it, they're going to have to concede and say, hey, we are getting a higher throughput than we did before. We now have this piece of equipment paid off, and we think we can come to the table and give you some concessions. So it does open the door for a renegotiation after the period of time, and the risk is off of that equipment because they've covered the cost and then some. And so it just opens that relationship up to be able to do that. So, and this is the core of your business, all this side of the house and the contracts and the commercial side very well.
So we've been talking a lot about kind of the impact of robotics inside the four walls of the fulfillment center. I'd love to talk a little bit about the impact that having robotics inside your fulfillment center has outside of your warehouse. And how does it improve? What data are you collecting? Where can that be helpful for your broader supply chain?
Yeah, we measure everything. I've got a data team, right? And one of the things that they always talk to me about how proud they are is that we have one centralized warehouse for all data for all aspects of our business. And so we can centralize it well, and then we can build and we can visualize it even better, I think. Some of the things that we're using are like SKU velocities, the SKU correlations. We talked about the peanut butter and jelly SKUs, helping them. One of the bigger reasons why most people don't go into a second or a third location is their fear around inventory placement, inventory carry, all the other challenges that come with it. So we're using that to help them support like what other markets you could go to, what SKUs need to go in certain markets, how much depth of SKU needs to go there and things of that nature. We use it to build hub and spoke models. So they have a lot of long tail SKUs. We see this in apparel a lot where they'll carry lots of ones and twos. Well, it's hard to put ones and twos in three warehouses, right? And it doesn't make sense to put them everywhere either because they're not selling often. So we'll look at their version of the 80/20, which probably lives somewhere 30 to 40%, is accounting for closer to 60% of the orders and has a better depth, and we'll spread those around, and we'll use that data to do that. We do that. We also use the automation for cycle counting and inventory accuracy double check. So we can do a lot of it through automation and the vision system so that we don't actually have to deploy people to do a check on whether or not and get paid to do a SKU count and stuff like that. So much information is coming through those systems right now, and we are able to action it and share it very easily with our brands that we work with because we expose them to our data warehouse and then work with them to action it. And so we present a lot of stuff in our business reviews about, hey, we're noticing this, we're seeing this. And it's also around packaging. We've done a lot of exercises around taking somebody from 18 box types down to 6 box types as an example. And what did that mean in terms of their transportation cubing? What did that mean in terms of their inventory carry of all the different packaging, drive down costs? We look at it through the lens of packaging. We look at it maybe in how they send stuff into us. One example is understanding how many units go into a bin over time and realizing that if they change their master carton, they could equate a master carton to be a tote as an example. And so we have less breakdowns, and so we can receive faster and more efficiently and thus turn back savings to them and those activities. So there's so much stuff that we see and capture and communicate back to the brands, both in reporting and also in business review level stuff.
That's awesome. I can't believe where the time is going. This has been a really fun conversation. I think we could go for a couple more hours. I guess the final question I would have for you is if I'm a brand and I'm interested in using robotics in my fulfillment operations in some way, where do I get started? What's the right way for me to think about when I'm going to be ready to find a partner that is leveraging robotics?
There's so many things to think about, right? It's understanding the profile. Do I have the right profile that's messy and complex? And do I have volumes? Do I see a hockey stick growth? So there's some of those things, but I think you should always be looking at it, right? I think if you're planning to grow and scale your business, you need to be thinking about the future. Everything takes a long time, right? So automation takes a long time. There's long lead times in anything warehouse related right now, material handling to conveyance to robotics to automation, et cetera. There's lots of backlog. And it takes time to engineer it, takes time to get the products, it takes time to deploy it, all those things. So I think if you're thinking that way, and the other thing too that we didn't talk about is it's not only just can it save me money, But there's also lots of companies that face just people not showing up to work, and like they just can't get bodies into work. So if I'm also having a high turnover or high call off all the time and my SLAs are failing miserably, maybe I need automation, not necessarily because I need to save money, but I need automation just to get work done. Those are also things to consider as well. And where do you start? I think one, it's folks like you that are constantly talking to companies and 3PLs and everything and have a good pulse on what's going on in the market. So it's talking to consultants, it's talking to integrators, it's talking to other 3PLs. Maybe it's starting with RFIs, right? And doing just an information gather session to see what's out there. And then from there, they work with somebody like you that says, hey, these things are really viable for your business. And we should be thinking about this. And let's talk about when and how you'd use something this. Do you go to 3PLs? Do you go to automation people? And then go to an RFP as an example, because they rattle off 12 different robotics types on the front end of the call. So trying to figure out what is the right solution, figuring out those things. But I don't know if there's ever a wrong time to be talking about future state of your business and how to improve it, and then working towards it and gathering that information and understanding the profiles over time. I think those things will become clear once you run the models and understand what the capabilities and the costs are.